Whatever you do, do not go see this movie without walking out thinking that it was not made by anyone else except Amy Pascal and Sony Pictures. Nobody else made this movie except them, because they try every single time that they can to let you know that they made it, especially through its fucking credits. Oh my god. Hey guys, David here, minus my little qualm with Sony Pictures and Columbia Pictures and Amy Pascal trying to stay relevant with the Spider-Man franchise. Here is my official review on Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm pretty sure that many of you guys have already seen various reviews from the critics praising the movie on Rotten Tomatoes, along with Chris Stuckman and Jeremy Johns. They already posted the reviews super early because that's the hottest new trend. But if you guys have been waiting for dear old me to talk about the movie day one for the public, here it is, which is a retelling of the Spider-Man character that has now been retrofitted smoothly into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but without still being kind of sort of held on by Sony Pictures. But this is their deal. This is the halfway mark that the both studios kind of met through, and they created the product of Spider-Man Homecoming. But it's definitely obvious that Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige had a very humongous creative input into the film, because it feels like those other Marvel superhero films, while at the same time still retaining that kind of originality that some of the Marvel movies would dare to do. Like Doctor Strange was kind of delving into the supernatural and slightly, not too much now looking back at it, but slightly much more horror stylized type of elements. We had Guardians of the Galaxy, which was a whole different beast to tackle altogether, and then we got Black Panther, which also has a new style and vibe to it that Ryan Coogler and Chadwick Boseman and all the people behind that movie are taking from the African American route. That's cool, that's welcome, that's fresh and new, that's awesome. It doesn't feel like the same movie over and over, and that's one of the biggest compliments that I could give to Spider-Man Homecoming, because it feels like a different movie. This time it's tackling that John Hughes high school type of era, while at the same time mixing it in with what it would have been like if John Hughes had done a superhero film, and that's pretty much what Spider-Man Homecoming is. It tackles the high school aspect about Peter Parker, and for those of you who might be afraid that it might be too boring or too meandering, no, it does tackle what it would be like if Peter Parker was still in high school. He wasn't the adultish high schooler that we kind of grown to be embedded into our brains from the Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi portrayal. Here it's more about it's a much more juvenile approach to Spider-Man. But when I say juvenile, I don't mean that in the sense of being immature. I mean that more in the sense of what it would be like to go back to those times where your biggest worry would be to be late for class. That's it. Or being expelled. But then throw on the hurdle of having to deal with people's lives and being this superhero that's more than life, bigger than what the common high schooler would begin to fathom, and him having to deal with that responsibility. Now, at the time of this movie, he has been dealing with the responsibility for quite some time. So the different approach that separates this movie not only from the various other movies that we had in the MCU so far, but also from the previous iterations of Spider-Man, from Sam Raimi's to even Mark Webb's and Andrew Garfield's portrayal of the character, is that we've already got the responsibility down with him trying to balance high school, which is still present here, but it's not like beaten to a pulp like we've seen in the other movies, because we've been there, done that. Now, a bigger obstacle for Peter Parker is try to fit into the universe. And when I say the universe, I don't just mean in the metaphorical sense, I also mean in the Marvel Cinematic Universe sense, and that's his biggest obstacle, because the movie opens up with him already being Spider-Man. The whole stuff with Uncle Ben died, it's even alluded at a couple of moments, but it's never kind of beaten over the head with it, which is awesome. He is, however, still a kid, and a kid always has aspirations, and he always looks at things that are so cool, and that's what Spider-Man has always been in the comics, and that's one of the approaches that you will probably not find in any other version of the character, from Tobey Maguire's to Andrew Garfield's, and that's what Tom Holland, through his portrayal of the character that we kind of got a glimpse of in Civil War, but now here he's anchoring the movie, and it just sticks with it. No pun intended. He sticks with it from beginning to end, and he never lets up. And you will definitely fall in love with the character all over again throughout the 120 minutes of this movie. But what also makes you fall in love with him is not only because of the quips that he does as Spider-Man and the way that he reacts to things, thinking that they're so cool and awesome, and he's still very much a kid, and that because of that kind of brightens up the kid inside of you, because no matter what age you're at, when you see Spider-Man geek out over the tiniest things, you're right there with them, and you're like, oh my god, I wish I could go back to those moments. Even back in high school when you're crushing over that girl that you feel is unattainable, you still feel the chemistry with him and the chemistry with his buddies at high school. Because when I say that it's John Hughes like, it really is John Hughes like that, even down to some of the detention scenes with jokes and elements roped in from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whether it be a training video by Captain America or mentionings of the events that happen in the Avengers. It's all woven in really tightly with a evened out pace where you got some action, then you got the high school elements roped in, while at the same time never letting up. Never that there a moment passed that I thought that there was ever a lull. And before I went on that tangent, what keeps the freshness of this movie going is that Spider-Man is trying to fit in with the Avengers. He is constantly waiting for that call by Tony Stark saying, hey, come deal with us. And that's one of the biggest things about this movie that's awesome, is that it questions like, okay, we got this dude with the hammer, we got the Iron Man, Captain America. For the most part, it looked like they handled situations fairly well. Of course, the events of Civil War kind of put that into question, but at this point, they got a revamped, much more unified and more importantly registered version of the Avengers that know how to conduct themselves and are able to handle some of these bigger villains that are going to be showing up. So how does Spider-Man fit into this? Better yet, what's the biggest question that this movie tackles? Do we need Spider-Man in this universe that has a dude wielding a hammer or a giant green guy that's able to punch through buildings? And that's a very important part about the movie that, like I said, you're not going to definitely see in any of those other versions of the character, at least up on the big screen, and that's one of the things that Spider-Man Homecoming has going for it. It's funny, too, because I saw an impression. It wasn't so much a review, but an impression on Twitter, because that's the new trend now, is to lift that embargo. There's the embargo for the reviews, and then there's the embargo for the Twitter impressions, where people post saying, yeah, I liked it, oh, I didn't like it, oh, man, hello, whatever, anything in between, under 140 characters on Twitter. That's like the hot new thing to do now with these movies so early in advance. And one of the things that I saw is that it handled the high school stuff very well, but not the Avengers MCU related stuff. It kind of faltered there. I was kind of worried with that, but honestly, it balanced things out perfectly. Never did I think that, oh, they showed a little bit too much of this, too much of that. So if any of you guys were worried that there was going to be way too much Tony Stark / Iron Man in this movie because of the promotional material from the trailers that ruined that moment about him saying, I'm going to need the suit back, so those god-awful posters that made it seem like Tony Stark was going to be all over this goddamn thing, don't worry a single hair on your head, because Tony Stark is barely in it. Some of the footage they've actually seen in the trailers is kind of sort of the gist of where he's in the movie, with a couple of extensions here and there that do kind of hint at bigger things to come for Spider-Man, which is awesome. But besides that, he is there to serve the plot and to make sure that Spider-Man's kind of on the right track. And I dare say that Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau, he has more screen time than Tony Stark even does in this movie. And I'm glad. I know that sounds kind of bad, but I'm glad, because the movie's called Spider-Man. It's about him and how he fits into this universe and how he tries to balance out high school with his life. That is a theme that we've seen before, and this movie does it even, I wouldn't say better, but does it in a different way that is still awesome and retainable. Like, you're able to go along with the ride. And also, in my opinion, it breaks the MCU villain curse, because Michael Keaton as the Vulture, definitely, I guess you can kind of consider this consider his portrayal of Vulture one of the best villains in the MCU so far. He's definitely no Ronan, he's no Malekith from Thor: The Dark World. He is awesome, not only from where the character is coming from, how he has this axe to grind with Tony Stark and some of the bigger guys, as he often puts it, but Michael Keaton's portrayal of the character is awesome. He hones every scene that he's in. He's intimidating when he needs to be, he's comedic when he needs to be, and also just the character of Vulture and the way he's designed is actually kind of scary. Hopefully I'm not ruining it for anybody, but there's a scene, or at least a shot, where he's perched up high on something, and I'm like, that is some creepy shit. However, now that I've gotten to the Vulture, here's where I'm going to bring in my nitpicks. And they really are, because whenever I think about them, they almost just as quickly evaporate, and I start to think about the next moment that made me smile. And with Vulture, I want to kind of use it as a way to overcompass some of the character decisions that they made, whether it be within the writing or even within the casting, where the writing wasn't so much, but they cast a certain actor in a role where I'm like, did they really need to be in this role? Without spoiling too much, because there's a couple of characters that are kept a secret and their names weren't fully mentioned in the trailers, or they weren't given enough screen time within those trailers or those promotional materials. There's certain characters that pop in from Spider-Man mythology, from the comics and whatnot, and the actors that they got to portray some of these characters don't really fit in that very well. There's one specific one that is part of the whole deal, the whole lore of Spider-Man, especially with him being in high school, and he's very different from what you're used to with this character. You usually expect one thing and he comes out being another here. And even though it wasn't terrible, again, I kind of understood where they were coming from. It was just a little bit weird. And again, similar things would happen with some of the characterizations that I would see often here and there. And one of the big things with the Vulture is that he's actually part of this twist that comes in late in the game about the beginning of the third act or whatever. And the twist feels, I don't want to say forced, but a little too coincidental. When I'm like, really? Really? Is it really that tied up here? It was a bit much. It was a bit of a stretch for me to kind of believe it. And I feel like at that point, technology advanced so much that a couple of names could have been looked up, and I'm like, I think Peter, being the smart guy that he is, could have made 2 and 2 together as opposed to being this big surprise. I'm like, And there were just a couple of questionable things that I can just pull out of my ass right here, like the girl that Peter's crushing on. Why, dude? I'm sorry. I mean, that's her prerogative, but I just never saw anything in her that made her like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, I just never saw that. And there's this thing with Vulture that was actually rather interesting and funny at the very beginning that I was kind of I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. You kind of turn something that's kind of cliche for a villain and turn it inside out with one simple joke of a line. I'm like, okay, that was cool. And then they kind of swept that under the rug. I thought it would have been a much more interesting route. But then again, I have a theory about that. But again, that would probably be saved up for a spoiler discussion down the line. Bottom line is that Spider-Man Homecoming had me smiling constantly, whether it be through the humor or the heart or the way that they got this character right in a fresh way that I haven't seen before, and that's due in part with how they were able to fit him in with the MCU. And for all those naysayers that didn't think that was possible, well, guess what? It looked like they got it right, because I can barely pick this movie apart and find anything that was tremendously harsh or bad about the movie, because all in all, they nailed it, and it's one movie that I would definitely not mind seeing again. So I'm going to be giving Spider-Man Homecoming a low 9 out of 10. Only because of those nitpicks, especially with that twist that I thought was a stretch. If they hadn't had that, I think this would have been almost a near perfect movie, minus my nitpicks. But besides that, Spider-Man Homecoming is a home run. I will commit suicide after this. Okay, at this point, most of you already have made up your mind that you're going to be seeing the movie, okay? So, if you've seen the movie, let me know all of your spoiler-free impressions down in the comments below, and what was the favorite part about the movie? What was the worst part about the movie? Or do you think that there are some interesting theories based on the way it ends, and based on the... Then again, hold on to that. I might be doing a spoiler discussion soon, so hold those comments on for that video, and then post them in that comment section. So, don't be a dick. That's my message to you. Captain America says, don't be a dick. Okay? At least, you know, I feel like that's something that Captain America would say. So please, let me know all of your guys' impressions and thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming in the comments below. Make sure you support the video by hitting the like and share button as always. And if you guys want to show some even further support and love to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. And also, you guys will happen to know that I have an Instagram and a Twitter, so be sure to follow me on those social webs at DarkSpiderDavid. And also make sure to stay tuned for future reviews on the channel, including some classic ones, whether it be on Spider-Man 3 or the X-Men movies, or Ang Lee's Hulk. Because I don't think that many people talk about that movie, and I feel like it deserves its just desserts. Very big green desserts. Anyways, that does it for me, guys. I'm going to get up on out of here. Let me know all of your guys' impressions on Spider-Man Homecoming, and stay tuned for future videos that I'm hoping to bring you guys. Until next time, guys, take care.